about mental disorders. Yes, you heard it right. Mental disorders, which means the disorders of the mind. People use a number of different terms for the mental disorders. You hear people talking about mental illness or psychological or psychiatric disorders, but for the most part, people mean the same thing when they're using these terms. The mental disorders are a major public health problem involving abnormalities that cause distress or disability and can even shorten a person's lifespan. It is commonly believed that mental disorders is something to be ashamed of. The stigma attached to this problem means that people are hesitant to consult doctors or psychologists because they are ashamed of their problems. Each year in the United States, just among about 25% of adults will meet the criteria for at least one mental disorder, and 6% of US adults will face a serious mental illness. They cause a significant distress or disability, and some people may even have more than one mental disorder at the same time, so that mental illness is a very common problem and should be viewed as any other mental illness. Here we present to you a series of videos that will help you in understanding the various mental and psychological disorders, the warning signs of mental health, and will also obtain an overview of the common treatments in a better way.
Hi everyone, I'm Varsharia and today I'm going to talk about depression. I'll be talking about what it is, its symptoms, its causes, and its treatment. I'll also be talking about a few myths and their facts. What is it? Feeling sad from time to time is normal and a part of life. But when extreme sadness and hopelessness take over us to not even let us function, it may suggest that we're suffering from depression. More than just being sad, it changes how we think, feel, and even function on a daily basis. It interferes with our ability to work, study, eat, sleep, and even enjoy life. Just getting through one day can be extremely overwhelming. A few myths and their facts. Myth 1: Depression is not a real illness. The truth is that depression is a very serious mental illness that really interferes with a person's life. Myth: You can simply snap out of it. The truth is that there are many steps taken in overcoming depression, including therapy, medication, and preventive steps. Myth: It happens because of a sad situation. The truth is that it has many causes, such as abuse, hormonal change, sudden loss of a family member, and even happy events can lead to depression. Myth: Talking about it only makes it worse. The truth is that talking about it actually helps a lot of people. It's called talk therapy or counseling. Another myth is that depression has no effective treatments. The truth is that there are many effective treatments for depression, such as counseling, therapy, and medications. Another myth is that depression is temporary and will go away by itself if the sufferer tries hard enough. The truth is that depression is not temporary. In fact, it has many chances of relapsing and requires therapy and medication. One of the last myths here is that highly intelligent or highly accomplished people do not get depressed. This is completely false. Depression can affect anybody irrespective of their intelligence or accomplishments. Symptoms of depression. There are three types of symptoms: psychological, physical, and social. A few of the psychological symptoms are feeling sad continuously, feeling helpless, lack of motivation, negative thoughts about their self, finding it difficult to make decisions, and even having suicidal thoughts. A few of the physical symptoms can be moving slower than normal, changes in appetite and weight, either an increase or decrease, feeling agitated and restless, disturbed sleep, and even memory loss. A few of the social symptoms are avoiding contact with friends and family, neglecting their hobbies and interests, having difficulties in home, work, or family life, and frequently being absent from work or working without a break. Causes of depression. There are multiple causes for depression. They can be family history of a mental illness, early childhood trauma, the structure of the brain, certain medical conditions, abuse in the past, certain medication, death or loss of a family member, major events, even good ones, other personal problems such as social isolation due to mental illnesses or being cast out of the family, substance abuse, giving birth, chemistry of the brain, or hormonal change. Treatment of depression. There are two types, therapy and medication. In therapy, therapy is also known as counseling, where one talks to their therapist and focuses on thoughts, feelings, and issues that are currently happening in their life. In certain cases, understanding the past may also help, where they find ways to address what is happening in their life and how they can cope with it and prepare for challenges in the future. In therapy, one works with their therapist to learn skills to help them cope with life, change behaviors that are causing problems, and find solutions. They shouldn't feel shy or embarrassed about talking openly about their feelings, as it is an important part of getting better. Medication. People find taking prescribed medications called antidepressants help their mood and coping skills. Antidepressants are medications that treat depression by improving the way the brain uses certain chemicals that control mood or stress. One may need to try several different antidepressant antidepressants as it takes time to find the right one that has manageable side effects and reduces their symptoms. It normally takes about 2 to 4 weeks to work, and the symptoms such as sleep, appetite, and concentration problems improve before the mood lifts. When one begins taking antidepressants, they should not stop taking them without consulting a doctor, as stopping them abruptly can cause withdrawal symptoms or even worsen the symptoms. When the patient and the doctor have decided it's time to stop the medication, the doctor will slowly and safely decrease the dose. To end, I would like to say that depression is not a sign of weakness or mental instability. It's just like any other illness, may it be diabetes or asthma. Depression can affect anyone at any point in their life. Depression can last for several weeks, months, or even years. People living with depression have enormous challenges to overcome, and so do their family and friends. So, people around them should try to educate themselves and try and provide compassionate care, reassurance, social support, and even psychiatric monitoring for their loved ones. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Hello everyone, I'm going to talk about schizophrenia. Schizo means split, and phrenia means mind or mental activity. Schizophrenia is a psychotic disorder which is characterized by emotional responsiveness and disintegration of thought. There are three categories of symptoms, which are positive symptoms. This include the behavior changes that are added by the disorder and which are not normally found in a healthy person. Agitation. This is a state of increased irritability and tension. Hallucination, which includes visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, and tactile hallucinations. Hallucination is something that seems real but does not really exist, and that is caused usually by mental illness. Visual hallucination is the sensation of seeing objects that are not really there. Auditory hallucination involves perceiving sounds without a true auditory stimulus. Olfactory hallucination makes you detect the smells that aren't really present in the environment. Gustatory hallucination is the sense of taste. Tactile hallucination is a sensation of physical contact with an imaginary object. Disorganized thinking. A person with schizophrenia loses the ability to keep track of their thoughts and conversation. They may start with talking about one topic and end with another topic, or respond to questions with irrelevant answers. Some forms of disorganized speech are neologism. This is making up words or phrases that only have meaning to the schizophrenic individual who created it. Slang, which is talking in rhymes even if it doesn't mean anything. Perseveration is repeating the same words or statements again and again. Loose associations, which is quickly changing topics with no link between one thought and the next one. Delusions, having false and illogical but firmly held beliefs because of inability to differentiate between real and unreal experiences. Delusions of control is believing an external force controlling their mind and actions. Delusions of reference is associating personal meaning to neutral events. Delusions of persecution is believing someone is trying to harm them. Delusions of grandeur is considering themselves as a popular personality. Negative symptoms are the abilities that are lacking or missing in schizophrenic individuals but are present in normal people. Lack of emotional response, which is lacking signs of emotions, such as lack of facial expressions or restricted or blank facial expressions, showing neither sadness nor happiness, monotone voice, and lack of eye contact. Social withdrawal or depression, being unaware of their surroundings or isolating themselves socially. Lack of initiative or drive, which is lacking self-care and no motivation. Apathy, which is experiencing feeling of emptiness and being unable to follow through any plans. Cognitive symptoms are problems relating to memory and concentration. This includes difficulty with concentration, difficulty understanding information and using it to make a decision, inability to use information immediately after learning it. Types of schizophrenia: catatonic, paranoid, disorganized, residual, undifferentiated. Let's talk about the first three in detail. This person has catatonic schizophrenia, which is attributed with disturbances in movement as well as extreme behaviors. This has two categories: catatonic stupor and catatonic excitement. In catatonic stupor, there is a dynamic reduction in activity in which virtually all movements stop and the affected person cannot move, respond, or speak. Catatonic excitement, which is characterized by hyperactivity or overexcitement. In this, the affected individual may mimic movements or sound around them. This person has paranoid schizophrenia. In this, the person's emotional expression and the intellectual performance may be normal, but the predominant attributes are auditory hallucinations and delusions regarding being targeted, mistreated, or provoked by a person or an association.
Why do you think they brought you to a psychiatric hospital?
Orders from somewhere else, I would
Or
assume.
were you in another
This
city
person
or in
has
another state?
disorganized schizophrenia. In this, the person may have behavior and speech which is disorganized or inappropriate or bland emotions.
Have you been hearing voices telling you to do things?
I know what the voice box is used for.
Can you tell me?
Hot and cold. I came for you. I came for you because you are the one. It's you. You are the one I came for. You are the one. It's you. It's you I came for.
There's no way I'm going to pass this exam. I don't even want to show up.
I was so uncomfortable at that party. It was hard for me to breathe, and I got all sweaty. I had to leave.
I won't go to sleep or leave the house unless I've made sure the stove is off and the doors are locked. Sometimes I do this 3 or 4 times.
I have to get to the airport 5 hours early. You just never know what might happen.
Hello everyone. What comes to your mind when I say the word anxiety? You might think of the times where you had to give a presentation or where you had to introduce yourself to a new group of people. Believe it or not, everyone has anxiety within them. Now, what is anxiety? Anxiety is what we feel when we are tensed, nervous, or worried. It can be experienced through our emotions, feelings, physical sensations. It's just our body's natural response to when we are under pressure. So when exactly does anxiety become a mental health problem? Usually when your feelings are very strong and they last over a long period of time, you find it hard to control your feelings. Now there are different types of anxiety disorders, but today we're just going to know about one in particular, which is panic attacks. Panic attacks are basically a type of fear responses that our body signals us when we are under pressure, threat, or maybe even when we're excited. So here are the symptoms of panic attack: sweating and trembling, rapid pulse, anxiety, heart beating, nausea, feeling of lack of air. As they say there is a solution to every problem, there are a few treatments to help reduce anxiety levels. They consist of a combination of psychotherapy, behavioral therapy, and counseling. So here are a few examples of self-treatment method. They include exercising, painting, eating your favorite food, watching videos online, writing, and meditation. Now let's talk about the preventions one can take in order to reduce his or her anxiety levels. Having a proper healthy sleep, a regular sleeping pattern is important. Eating proper nutritious food, reducing the amount of caffeine, tea intake and other beverages as well, and strictly avoiding alcohol and the dependence on drugs to reduce your anxiety levels. Anxiety itself is not a medical condition but a natural emotion that is important for survival when an individual finds themselves under pressure. To conclude this video, I would like to state a quote by famous author Dan Millman. You don't have to control your thoughts, you just have to stop letting them control you. With this being said, let's live our life to the fullest and cherish every little thing gifted to us. Thank you so much for watching this video.
Hello guys, I wanted to share an incident which happened a few months ago. So I was in the park all by myself and my friend Ritu came. From the very few moment I can able to understand that she was acting weird. So I asked about this, but she pretended like nothing happened. But I can observe that she was lacking sleep, pretended to be in her own world and a lot of mood swings. As I'm a psychology student, I heard a term from my teacher about mood disorder or bipolar disorder. Yes, the word is bipolar disorder, stress on the world. So the word bipolar means two poles, signifying the polar opposite of mania and depression. The term first appeared in American Psychiatric Association (APA) and Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Disorders (DSM) in the third revision in 1980s. Treatment for bipolar disorders are psychotherapy treatment. Psychotherapy treatment may include cognitive behavior therapy. So cognitive behavior therapy is a type of talk therapy. You and a therapist talk about ways to manage your bipolar disorder. They will help you come up with a positive coping strategy. Manic episodes may include symptoms such as high energy, reduced need for sleep, and loss of touch with reality. Depressive episodes may include symptoms such as low energy, low motivation, and loss of interest in daily activities. Mood episodes last days to months at a time and may also be associated with suicidal thoughts. People may experience People may experience mood swings, anxiety, anger, loss of interest, hopelessness, unwanted thoughts, delusion, lack of concentration, racing thoughts, slowness in activities.
Hello everyone, this is Shrija from grade 12. Friends, we often come across the term personality in our daily life. But do we actually know the meaning of personality? Don't worry, I'm here to explain you about the meaning of personality and different types of personality disorders. So here you go with my topic for today, which is personality disorders. So first, let's try to understand the meaning of personality. Personality is the combination of characteristics which makes us relatively distinctive individual. Now, what do we mean by personality disorder? Personality disorder is a mental disorder in which there is a rigid and unhealthy way of thinking, perceiving, and obtaining information. So, now let's get started with the topic. Now, let's talk about personality disorders in detail. The personality disorders are categorized into three clusters: Cluster A, Cluster B, and Cluster C. Let's look into each one of them. The cluster A contains paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder. The symptoms of paranoid personality disorder are distress and suspicion of others and their own motives, belief that others are trying to harm or deceive them, and they even have suspicion of the loyalty or trustworthiness of others. So these people, they generally face trust issues with the people in their surroundings, and they cannot trust any person easily. Next, schizoid personality disorder. The symptoms of this disorder are lack of interest in social or personal relationship, limited expression of emotions, that means they cannot express themselves, and inability to take pleasure in most of the activities. So these people find it very difficult to socialize with others, and they're not comfortable in socializing. Next is schizotypal personality disorder. So the symptoms of this are odd perceptual experiences, inappropriate emotional responses, and social anxiety and discomfort with relationship. Moving on to cluster B personality disorders, they contain antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder. Let's look into each one of them in detail. Antisocial personality disorder. So the people have this always have a disregard for others' needs and feelings. They always have a habit of lying and stealing. They violate the rights repeatedly, and they even show aggressive behavior towards others. Borderline personality disorder. The symptoms are unstable or fragile self-image. So basically, we can say they have a very low self-confidence. They even face unstable relations. They have frequent mood swings. They even show suicidal behavior, and they even have anger management issues. Next is histrionic personality disorder. So the people who have this disorder, they try to seek attention constantly. They are excessively emotional, and they can be easily influenced by others, and they have excessive concern about their own physical appearance. So these are some of the symptoms of histrionic personality disorder. Moving on, narcissistic personality disorder. So these people have a belief that they are special and more important than others. They also have fantasies about power, success, and attractiveness. They always exaggerate their achievements and talents, and they even have arrogant behavior towards others. Next, cluster C personality disorders contains avoidant personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So the avoidant personality disorder, symptoms are the people are too sensitive to criticism or rejection. They feel inadequate and unattractive, and they always avoid work activities. They isolate themselves socially, and they face extreme shyness in social situations. So we can say they have trouble interacting socially. Next is dependent personality disorder. The symptoms are excessive dependence and submissive behavior towards others. They always feel the need to be taken care of. They lack self confidence, and they even tolerate poor treatment. They never complain or raise their voice against poor treatment. And we have obsessive compulsive personality disorder. The symptoms are extreme perfectionism. They always want all the things to be perfect. They are rigid, stubborn. They are very particular about punctuality. They neglect family, friends, and enjoyable activities as they give prime importance to their work. We need to note that obsessive compulsive personality disorder is not the same as obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a type of anxiety disorder. So there's a lot of difference between the two. So let's talk about the causes of personality disorders. The first one is genes. So certain personality traits, which are the causative agents for the personality disorders, they may be passed on from the parents to the progeny. So genes can play a major role in the development of this personality disorder. The next cause is environment. Environment, in the sense the surroundings in which people grow up, their the past life events, and the relationship with family and others. So these are the two major causes of personality disorders. We can say the combination of genes and environment makes you vulnerable to developing the disorder. Talking about the diagnosis of the personality disorder, it is usually carried out with the help of a simple physical examination where the subject is asked about his or her health condition. The next way is through psychiatric evaluation, where there's a discussion on person's thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So this is carried out for the diagnosis to be made. Now let's discuss about the treatment, the various ways of treating the personality disorders. The first one is psychotherapy. In this, you can learn about your condition and talk about your moods, feelings, and thoughts with the psychotherapist, and solutions will be provided accordingly. Now, some of the medications which are prescribed for the treatment of personality disorders are antidepressants. They are useful if you have a depressed mood, anger, and irritability. Mood stabilizers. They can help even out mood swings, and they even reduce aggression. People with mild cases of personality disorder are always advised to undergo psychotherapy, as psychotherapy doesn't require any kind of medications. Now, the next medication is antipsychotic medication, which are also called as neuroleptics. These are helpful if you lose touch with reality. This condition is also called as psychosis, or if you have anxiety or anger problems. These are very helpful. The last one is anti-anxiety medications. These are useful if you have anxiety, agitation, or insomnia. So these are the various treatment options. I would like to conclude by saying that where there is a will, there is a way. And we can only recover from these disorders or any kind of disorder by having a strong willpower, determination, and patience. And we should never leave our positive attitude. And there's nothing impossible when we ourselves have a positive attitude within us. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Anika Nandedkar of class 12B, and today I'm going to be talking about phobias. So, what is a phobia? Well, in simple words, a phobia is a type of anxiety disorder that causes an individual to go through extreme and irrational fear of places, objects, or people, etc. But today we're going to be talking about entomophobia and arachnophobia. So, what is entomophobia? Well, entomophobia is more commonly known as the phobia of insects, and this happens because of the lack of socialization with the environment. Arachnophobia is an intense fear of spiders or spiderphobia. While it's not uncommon for people to dislike insects, phobias of spiders can impact our lives, and arachnophobia can prevent you from participating in certain events or situations because your mind tells you that you are in danger from spiders, and thus this phobia can be debilitating and can interfere with your life. But it's easy enough to work with once you've identified the fear of spiders. Now, what is spiders versus spiderwebs? Well, both the intense fear of spiders and spiderwebs are specific phobias and fall under arachnophobia itself. People may be afraid of spiders but not spiderwebs, while people can also be afraid of spiderwebs but not spiders. So, yeah, it is a kind of specific phobia, and these phobias center around single items compared to other phobias like social anxiety. And the causes for this is genetics. Genetics can play a major role in the inheritance of phobias, and a negative experience can trigger arachnophobia. Also, a child can learn a phobia from their parent, for instance, who screams at the sight of an insect. The symptoms of arachnophobia are lightheadedness and sweating, increased heart rate, nausea, and social isolation. Also, people might find themselves unwilling to go into situations where they have to encounter spiders, etc. Treatment options for arachnophobia is exposure therapy. Now, this type of therapy is also referred to as systematic desensitization. And in exposure therapy, we basically expose spiders to a person who is afraid of them. But this is done under heavily guarded circumstances and cannot be done if not present with a psychologist. CBT. CBT is the short form for cognitive behavioral therapy, and it centers your thoughts and beliefs about the source of your phobia. And medications. There are no specific medications for arachnophobia, but anxiety drugs and beta blockers and antidepressants can help you with controlling your anxiety with the fear of spiders. Now, diagnosis. Well, to diagnose entomophobia, a doctor will go through a thorough clinical and background checkup for any symptoms and causes, and only a trained healthcare professional can confirm a diagnosis of a phobia. Thank you. That was my presentation. Hope you like it.
PTSD, a mental illness that most people think is not that common. But in India alone, it affects over 10 million people per year. Let's see what this disorder is all about, shall we? It is a mental health condition that is triggered by trauma. It could include both experiencing it and witnessing it. For example, if you've been in a car crash, or if you've been abused, or if you've seen someone die, these are all things that could lead up to PTSD. The symptoms could be unnoticeable at most times, but in the future it could lead to very serious physical damage. So let's see what these symptoms are. The first symptom of PTSD is intrusive memories. Intrusive memories include having recurrent dreams and reliving that moment like flashbacks. This could also include nightmares, which would lead to emotional distress and having physical reactions to things relating to the trauma. The second symptom is avoidance. You would go to great lengths to avoid the topic of your trauma. You would not talk about it and also avoid places, people relating to the trauma. You would not go to the place that the trauma happened or any place that looks like it. You would not meet people who remind you of the trauma. The third symptom is negative changes in thinking and mood. If you're feeling hopeless about your future, if you have negative thoughts about yourself or people or the world in general, if you have problem remembering things or have difficulty maintaining close relationships, if you're feeling detached from your family and friends, or have a lack of interest in the activities that you once loved, if you're feeling numb, and if you're feeling that you can't express your emotions in a positive way. Now you might be wondering, what are the changes in your physical and emotional reactions? Here's a list of few changes that could possibly happen. You could be startled easily, or you're always on guard, you're always ready to throw a punch. Or you could have a self-destructive behavior, like you drive too fast, or you drink too much, or you smoke, or you try to harm yourself in any other possible way. You have trouble sleeping and concentrating on things. You are always angry or sometimes have random anger outbursts, or you're irritated by small things. You could also have an overwhelming sense of shame or guilt about your trauma, or shame or guilt in general about simple things. These are all symptoms for adults, but what do you think are the symptoms for kids? Children under the age of 6 could reenact their trauma in a play. Like if a kid has been in a car crash, they're going to play with toys and make it seem like they're in a car crash. Or they could show their cars falling down and them having a reaction to it. Them having frightening dreams is not that common, but might happen or might not. The symptoms of PTSD can be tricky because they might seem like common day-to-day stress. But if you've experienced the symptoms that I've explained before and have had trauma in the recent times, then you could have PTSD. You should probably get checked up by a medical professional because over time these symptoms intensify. You could be threatened by the sound of a car backfiring because it makes you think of combat. Or you could be threatened by a report on TV about sexual assault, which brings back memories of your own experience. So please consult a doctor who could help you get your life back in track and stop these disruptive memories from coming back. If you're someone who has recently been in a traumatic event, then the question in your mind is, how do I prevent PTSD? Well, you can't prevent it from happening, but you can stop it from developing into a long-term post-traumatic stress disorder. Here's how. You can reach out to your friends and family for support, or you can go to a course of therapy. You can also go to support groups that are developed for your specific kind of PTSD, where people who have survived the same trauma as you share their experience. Or you could start to regain faith in your community. It has worked for a few people. These are all healthy coping mechanisms, unlike other unhealthy coping mechanisms that lead up to serious health issues in the future. Having PTSD can lead up to other mental illnesses like anxiety or depression, eating disorder, or use of alcohol and drugs as an unhealthy coping mechanism. It could also lead to suicidal thoughts. If you're having any suicidal thoughts, I would recommend that you use a suicide hotline, or you go to therapy or see a medical professional. You could also talk to your friends and your family about it and get their support in helping you regain your balance in life. This is Deekshita Shriya, and that was my take on post-traumatic stress disorder. Thank you for watching. Let's go to the next video.
The form of ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It is a mental health disorder that can cause above normal levels of hyperactivity and impulsive behaviors. People with ADHD might also have trouble focusing their attention on a task or sitting still for a longer period of time. Both adults and children can have ADHD. Some of the common symptoms of ADHD are having trouble focusing, being forgetful about completing tasks, being easily distracted, having difficulty by sitting still, interrupting people while they're talking. If you have ADHD, you may have some or all of these symptoms. The symptoms you have depend on the type of ADHD you have. There are three types of ADHD: predominantly inattentive, predominantly hyperactive and impulsive type, and combination of both. Firstly, predominantly inattentive. People with this type of ADHD have extreme difficulty focusing, finishing tasks, and following instructions. And predominantly hyperactivity impulsive type. People with this type of disorder show primarily hyperactivity and impulsive behavior. This can include fidgeting, interrupting people while they're talking, not being able to wait for their turn. With this type of ADHD, people might find difficult on focusing on tasks. Combined hyperactivity, impulsive, and inattentive type. This is the most common type of ADHD. People with this combined type of ADHD display both inattentiveness and hyperactive symptoms. This includes inability to pay attention, impulsiveness, and above normal levels of activity and energy. What causes ADHD? Despite how common ADHD is, doctors aren't sure what causes the condition. It is believed to have neurological origins. Genetics may also play a role. A reduction in dopamine is a factor in ADHD. Dopamine is a chemical in the brain that helps move signals from one nerve to another nerve. It plays a role in triggering emotion responses and movements, or structural difference in the brain. Structural difference in the brain can be a factor because findings indicate that the people with ADHD have less matter volume. Gray matter volume includes the brain areas that help with speech, self-control, decision making, and muscle control. ADHD testing and diagnosis. There is no single test that can tell if you have ADHD. A recent study highlighted the benefits of a new test to diagnose adult ADHD, but many of them believe an ADHD diagnosis cannot be made based on a test. To make a diagnosis, your doctor will first assess any symptoms you have over the previous 6 months. The doctor will likely gather information from the teachers or your parents. Then they may also use checklists and rating scales to review symptoms. They'll also do a physical examination to check for the other health problems. Treatment for ADHD. Treatment for ADHD typically includes behavior therapist, medication, or both. Type of therapies include psychotherapy or talk therapy. With talk therapy, you will also discuss how ADHD affects your life and ways you help to manage it. Another therapy is behavior therapy. This therapy can help you with learning how to monitor and manage your behavior. Medication can also be very helpful if you're living with ADHD. ADHD medications are designed to affect brain chemicals in a way that enables you to better control your impulsive and actions. ADHD medication. Two main types of medications used to treat ADHD are stimulants and non-stimulants. Central nervous system stimulants are the most commonly prescribed ADHD medications. These drugs work by increasing the amount of brain chemicals like dopamine. Natural remedies for ADHD. For starters, following a healthy lifestyle may help you manage ADHD symptoms by eating a healthy, balanced diet, get at least 60 minutes of physical activity per day, get plenty of sleep, limit daily screen time from phones, computers, and televisions. Studies have also shown that yoga, tai chi, and spending time outdoors can help calm overactive minds and may ease ADHD symptoms. Mindfulness medication is another option. During this crucial time, as we take good care of our physical health, mental health should also be considered. Our mental health affects our mood, thinking, and behavior. If we not take proper care of our mental health, it can lead to mental illness.
Hello everyone, this is Tanya, and today we'll be talking about eating disorders, and we'll also understand why it is important for us to know about eating disorders and how it can affect one's mental health. So first, we'll start by understanding what an eating disorder is. So, an eating disorder is an illness that occurs due to inadequate or irregular eating habits and severe distress or concern about body shape or body weight. Eating disturbances may include inadequate or excessive food intake that can be harmful for one's well being. The most common types of eating disorders are binge eating disorders, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, etc. Eating disorders can occur during any stage of life, but mostly it occurs during young adulthood or teenage years. It can affect both females and males, but generally affects more females. Next, we'll start by talking about symptoms of an eating disorder. So, first symptom is chronic dieting despite being hazardously underweight. That means that a person who's suffering from an eating disorder and that person is underweight, but still that person is gonna restrict themselves from eating particular types of foods because they feel like they're gonna gain weight and they'll not be able to maintain a particular body shape. Next, we have constant weight fluctuations. That means the person's weight keeps on changing. It doesn't remain same. It might decrease, it might increase. Next, we have obsession with calories and fat contents of food. That means that the person who's suffering from an eating disorder, that person is going to check what all, how many fats are there, calories, everything that person is going to check. And that person will try to restrict themselves from eating those types of foods. Next, we have engaging in ritualistic eating patterns, such as cutting food into tiny pieces, eating alone, and or hiding food. Continued fixation on food recipes or cooking. The individual may cook intricate meals for others but refrain from partaking. That means the person might cook food for other people, but they restrict themselves from eating that food. Next is depression or lethargic stage. Then avoidance of social functions, family and friends may become isolated and withdrawn. It means that the person will start being alone and will not like being with others or socializing with others. And switching between periods of overeating and fasting. That means that the person might start eating a lot or might start eating very less. Next, we're going to talk about types of eating disorders. So first is anorexia. So it generally develops during adolescence or young adulthood, and it tends to affect more females than men. So people who are suffering from anorexia, they view themselves as overweight even if they're dangerously underweight. They constantly monitor their weight, their body shape, their calories, and they restrict themselves from eating particular types of foods. Next, we have bulimia nervosa. So people who suffer from bulimia nervosa, they frequently eat large amounts of foods during a specific period of time. Again, like anorexia, it develops during adolescence and young adulthood, and it tends to affect more women. So people who suffer from this disorder, they have binge eating episodes regularly. So they keep on eating large amounts of foods until they're painfully full. During the binge episode, they feel like they cannot control themselves, they cannot stop eating. So they also follow purging behaviors because they feel like they've consumed a lot of calories and they need to maintain a particular body shape or body weight. So what they do for that is they follow these purging behaviors like forced vomiting, fasting, laxatives, etc. So binge eating disorders is another type of eating disorder, but it has similar symptoms like bulimia nervosa. Next, we have pica. So individuals with pica crave non-food substances such as cornstarch, chalk, or wool, or stones, etc. So it can occur in adults, in children, in adolescents. So it is frequently observed in children and pregnant women, and also with people who suffer from mental disabilities. Next, we have rumination disorder. So people who suffer from this, they tend to chew, they tend to re-chew the food they've already chewed and swallowed. So they re-chew it, and they either spit it out or they swallow it. So this rumination, it occurs within the first 30 minutes after eating the meal. This disorder can develop during infancy, childhood, or adulthood. In infants, it tends to develop between 3 to 12 months of age, and it disappears on its own. But if it's not treated, then the children might suffer from weight loss and malnutrition. Same goes with the adults as well. If they keep on if they keep on suffering from this disorder, they might also lose weight and they will become underweight, which is not healthy for them. Then other eating disorders. So we've already studied about 6 eating disorders before this, but these disorders, they do not come under those disorders. That's why they have a different category. So first is purging disorder. So people who suffer from this disorder, they follow purging behaviors that we've studied before, but they do not binge. So we'll read that individuals with purging disorder often use purging behaviors such as vomiting, laxative, diuretics, or excessive exercising to control their weight or shape. However, they do not binge. Next, we have night eating syndrome. So people who suffer from this, they eat excessively, often after awakening from sleep. Then we have other specified feeding or eating disorder, OSFED. This is the short form. This includes any other conditions that have symptoms similar to those of an eating disorder, but do not fit into any of the categories above. Next, we'll talk about diagnosis of eating disorders. So people who suffer from eating disorders, they're diagnosed based on signs, symptoms, and their eating habits. So to understand more about that eating disorder, they go through some tests. So those tests include physical exam, psychological evaluation, and other studies. So physical exam. So the doctor will examine the patient and rule out other medical causes that can lead to that eating issues that they have. He or she may also order lab tests. Then next we have psychological evaluation. A doctor or mental health professional will likely ask about the patient's thoughts, feelings, and eating habits. Patients may also be asked to complete psychological self-assessment questionnaires. Other studies. Additional tests may be done to check for any complications related to the patient's eating disorder. Next, we have treatment of eating disorders, how we can cure it, how we can treat it. So treatment of an eating disorder generally includes a team approach. The team includes primary care providers, mental health professionals, and dietitians. So people who are very unhealthy and their life is at risk, they might need immediate hospitalization. So the treatment also depends on the specific type of eating disorder, but in general it includes nutrition, education, psychotherapy, and medication. So first we'll talk about healthy eating. So the team members, they try to promote healthy eating for the patient. They try to make them understand that it's not unhealthy to eat particular types of foods. And due to that, the person will be able to achieve healthy eating habits. Next, we have psychotherapy. So psychotherapy, also called talk therapy, can help the patient learn how to replace unhealthy habits with healthy ones. Same thing, educating them, making them understand about it. So that helps the patient a lot. Next, we have medications. Medications can't cure an eating disorder. However, certain medications may help the patient to control urges to binge or purge, to manage excessive preoccupations with food and diet. Drugs as antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications may help with these symptoms of depression or anxiety, which are frequently associated with eating disorders. Like we've studied before in the symptoms that the person might suffer with depression. So medications might help with their purging or eating habits. Next, we have hospitalization. If the patient has serious health problems such as anorexia that has resulted in severe malnutrition, the doctor may recommend hospitalization. Some clinics specialize in treating people with eating disorders. Some may offer day programs. Rather than full hospitalization, specialized eating disorder programs may offer more intensive treatment over longer periods of time. Next, reduce stress and anxiety. Some complementary treatments and approaches may help reduce stress and anxiety, promote relaxation, and increase a sense of well-being in people with eating disorders. Examples include acupuncture, massage, yoga, meditation. So these can be followed to reduce stress and anxiety. Even you guys can do it to reduce stress and anxiety. It can help. Next, we have coping and support. It's difficult to cope with an eating disorder when the patient is hit with mixed messages by the media, culture, and perhaps their own family or friends. So basically, social media and even their friends or family members, whoever they have with them, they might promote unhealthy eating habits. They might lead them to start, feeling this way that they need to have a particular body shape or body weight. So, if the person who's suffering from an eating disorder, if their family members or if their friends, if they're supportive, if they're helpful, then the person might be able to recover soon. Whether you or your loved one has an eating disorder, ask your doctor or mental health professional for advice on coping and emotional support. Emotional support plays a very important role. It helps a lot. Learning effective coping strategies and getting the support you need from family and friends are vital to successful treatment. Now, why does it need awareness? Why do we need to be aware of an eating disorder? So, eating disorders have a profound effect on people's body and mind, but many people are unaware of how serious the consequences can be. Awareness should be spread to make people understand about the dangers of malnutrition, purging, excessive exercise, and other destructive behaviors that typically accompany an eating disorder. So, there is a lot of risk. I mean, people might even die due to an eating disorder because it is not healthy. If you keep being underweight, it might lead to death. Next, we have although understanding these effects won't cure an eating disorder without other forms of therapy, it helps people to realize just how important it is to achieve successful eating disorder recovery. So, that's it for today. I hope it helped you guys a lot to understand about an eating disorder. Thank you and have a nice day.